Greetings again, everyone, and welcome to Prophetic News Hour 1. This is Maverine again, and today is April 22nd, 2025. Today, I want to continue what we've been speaking about, particularly what we've been speaking about as it relates to Israel's current war and how that affects the entire world. My goal has been to address things that are not being widely addressed by the mainstream media, and in many cases are not being consistently addressed by media that we've come to expect to address things that the mainstream media will not. And I've considered why that is for years. This has not been a quick response to starting this news channel, if you will. This has been a response, or is a response, to the decades long observation that one sided stories, one sided rhetoric have been and led to detrimental effects for every freedom loving citizen of their nation in the world. And I specify nation because we are each citizens of a specific nation. There are boundaries, and there are also privileges that come along with being legal citizens of your nation, of your established boundaries. Today, I'm going to speak a little bit about the Oslo Accords. The Oslo Accords were a series of agreements after meetings that were proxied, if you will, and mediated by the United States. At the time, the President of the United States of America was William Clinton, Bill Clinton, and he negotiated these high-level meetings after time in Oslo. It's known as Oslo because that's where the accords were finally signed. The agreements, if you will, were signed between who was then the Prime Minister of Israel and Yasser Arafat. And I want to speak specifically, and I want to, let me just say very clearly here that this again is about speaking what is historically accurate and true and helping to connect the dots for what the impact is on us today. The Oslo Accords were signed in 1993. So that would be 22 years or so ago. They were signed September 13th, 1993. So we're just short of the 22nd year anniversary of this signing. And the Prime Minister of Israel at the time was Yitzhak Rabin. And in this agreement, there was to be autonomy and recognition of the people at the time in the area of what is now called Gaza and the West Bank for self-rule, to give them an opportunity to elect leadership and to begin to build the nation that at that point those with Middle Eastern and Persian background, Arabic and Persian background, had been demanding was their right. And so with this signing of the Oslo Accords, it was seen as unprecedented because the result was a limited self-governance, and I'm reading specifically from Britannica now. The results were a limited self-governance for who are called the Palestinians, which we know is a melting pot, to say the least, of many people from many nations who now call themselves Palestinians in the West Bank which is truly Judea and Samaria, and the Gaza Strip, through the creation of the Palestinian Authority. The goal of these Oslo Accords and what was touted was that it would resolve all of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict by May of 1999. So September 13th, 1993, when the Oslo Accords were signed, and the goal was that within the span of just less than 6 years, May of 1999, all of the contention, all of the hatred, all of the terrorist attacks against Israel would have been ceased and resolved, because the justification then for the hostility was no longer there, right? You've been given, as those who identify now as a Palestinian group of people, you've been given the right to self-rule, given land that is Judea and Samaria, now known as or called the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. You may elect your own leaders. You may self-rule. We again are in 2025, and neither have the Oslo Accords nor any agreement to peace or ceasefiring or hindrance of terrorist attacks against the people of Israel and Jews around the world ceased. There has been no appeasement to those who identify with and support what is the genocidal Palestinian cause to eradicate and kill every Jew everywhere. And so my question and my consideration for us is this. When Winston Churchill and the entire world was faced with the same issue, there was a period of time where history reports that Churchill was trying to warn the world about the Nazi regime in Germany. It says in the early and mid 30s, 1930s, Churchill's warnings about the danger of the new Nazi regime in Germany fell on deaf ears. Winston Churchill continually tried to warn the world, and no one listened. No one believed. No one wanted to offensively and preemptively deal with Hitler and his Nazi regime in Germany. No one wanted to step into the messes of war. But then in 1938, it was such that the Nazi regime's encroachment and their increasing aggression became so obvious that it's reported that Britain and Germany also almost went to war in 1938 because of Hitler's expectation, his plans, his encroachment to annex parts of what is now Czechoslovakia. The Prime Minister for Great Britain at the time, a man named Neville Chamberlain, flew to Munich, meeting with Hitler and his representatives, wanting to secure a guarantee from Hitler, a guarantee from the Nazis, a guarantee from a narcissistic sociopathic murderer that they would not act aggressively against Czechoslovakia or the world. And Prime Minister Chamberlain at the time, I think, pridefully so, thought that he was successful. But there was this man, Winston Churchill, who was very critical about Great Britain's, how do you say, kindness toward Hitler and Nazi Germany. What is said to be or thought to be what was thought to be the appeasement of Hitler and Nazi Germany. And Winston Churchill is reported to have reached out to the United States of America to ask the United States of America to get involved, to be directly engaged, hoping, expecting that with the engagement of the United States, particularly after the outcome of World War I, which Hitler was intimately aware of and experienced, hoping that Hitler would see the partnership between the United States of America and nations like Great Britain or even him, people like him, and stand down. But the United States decided not to get engaged at that point. And so, what did Hitler do shortly thereafter? He continued his press because a narcissistic, sociopathic murderer, terrorist, genocidal maniac is not reasonable and cannot be negotiated or reasoned with as a regular human. So Hitler continued, and he went on to occupy Prague. He went on to occupy the Czech provinces of Bohemia and Moravia. And he went on essentially to prove Winston Churchill accurate. And then in September of 1939, Germany invaded Poland. And that started the battle of the world. What Winston Churchill called the unnecessary war. And why did he call it unnecessary? Because if Great Britain had not wanted or ignorantly, maybe naively, maybe pridefully, maybe some combination of all of those things, thought that they could appease and negotiate with Hitler, and or together the United States of America had joined Great Britain in their hard line against Hitler, maybe World War II, the unnecessary war, would not have occurred. Who knows? Because there are things that happened leading up to and into World War II that unfortunately are manifestations of what the world and what various nations and people groups had decided to be based upon their own free will. But here's the thing. We are in that same place now. At some point, Winston Churchill began to be called in propaganda the Bulldog because he had a bulldog focus on not appeasing Nazi Germany and Hitler. There was a very brief moment where it's reported that he went to meet or was thought to go meet with Hitler and Nazi Germany, thinking that there could be potentially an agreement. But once he saw the truth, it didn't last long. Do we have bulldog leaders either in Israel, the United States of America, Argentina now, freedom-loving nations? Do we have bulldog leaders, or do we have ones who, for whatever reason, seek to appease terrorists? In the news, you'll hear the Palestinian Liberation Organization, over which the man known as Yasser Arafat, which is a made-up name, it's a moniker, it's not his real name, was the head until shortly before his death, until his death. You'll hear that the PLO is not Hamas. And if leadership is returned to the PLO, that both the people of Gaza And the people of Israel, and by extension, what we're seeing, the people of Western nations who are being overrun by terrorist organizations and NGOs, will become safe. But Yasser Arafat is known as the father of modern terrorism. He actually was born in Egypt. He spearheaded terrorist attacks. And through his cunning, he also knew how to present himself as a government or political leader, thereby, I believe, giving credibility to terrorist organizations. So ask yourself this question the next time you hear the lie that if Israel would just leave Gazans alone and let them self-rule, there would be no terror around the world. There would be no calls for the intifada. Calls for the intifada not just in Israel, calls for intifada in the United States of America, calls for intifada in Great Britain, throughout Europe, calls for intifadas from those on the African continent in countless nations, calls for intifada within Canada and Australia, calls against people, many of whom of us have never stepped foot in Israel. But the desire is to exact fear and terror and maiming and death on us until terrorist organizations, terrorist groups, terrorist families, terrorist cells and entities control and can exact their brand of law and religion on us and on our land and on our children. Young people who have never stepped foot in the Middle Eastern countries, young people who've never truly experienced Sharia, and from their ivory towers of Western riches, Western safety, Western entitlement, Western spoiling by parents who helicoptered and gave them everything they need lest they ever be uncomfortable, you are really opening yourselves up to receive what it is you say that you want. You say that you want the leaders of Gaza and this Palestinian movement to lead your nation, your community, your state. You say that you don't want the freedoms that come with living in a nation that does not bow our head to the idea of jihad. But you really have no idea. The hostages who are still alive, now thought to be as few as 24, clinging to life, they understand in a way that they never understood before. The Oslo Accords in 1993, they're just one of the examples in history where every attempt to appease terrorist organizations has failed. We have in our history, not so long ago, the example of a bulldog who recognized the ignorance of trying to negotiate with a snake while your head is in its mouth in Winston Churchill. The United States of America has been set on a correcting path in some ways, certainly not most, and in many ways not the most important. But in this, we need a bulldog to lead. We need a bulldog who will not bluff with ones who have no conscience, because you can't bluff with wickedness. They have no conscience. Any entity who would put its women, children, mothers, elderly in the path of being their covering from bombs and bullets, from a war that was caused by their own action, cannot be thought to be ones who should ever receive the dignity of negotiating peace and expecting a truly peaceful response. As it was with the one known as Yasser Arafat, whose whole persona was made up and fake, we are now seeing leaders of terrorist organizations whose hands are dripping with the blood of innocent people sit in the halls of government and in the presence of leaders being given legitimacy when they should instead being dealt with as the risk they are to free society. Yasser Arafat was not a native to what is now known as Palestine. Yasser Arafat was a wealthy young man from Egypt. Yasser Arafat grew up in Jerusalem under British rule before World War II. Yasser Arafat had the experience of Britain's colonization in Israel and skirmishes there. But Yasser Arafat carried with him a lifelong hatred for the Jewish people, the people of Jehovah God. And he built for himself a persona, having come out of terrorist activities hands on, as one named Muhammad Abdel Rahman Abdel Rauf al Quda al Husseini. That's his name. So, to put it in clear words, do we have bulldogs as leaders in nations who will stand against the continuing encroachment, the infiltration even, of ones whose ultimate goal is to destroy every human being who does not bow to their God? Or do we have Shih Tzus? That's all I have for today. I'm going to put the links for some information about the Oslo Accords, about the real identity of Yasser Arafat in the description. But again, remember, until I have 100 followers, the links won't work. So you'll have to cut and paste the HTTPS address, if you will, into your browser to be able to get to the information I'm sharing with you. The information is all open source, and I just want to be clear that I don't own the rights to any of that information. It's just as I am pulling these things together and wanting to stay clear and succinct, I'm trying to find the things that are most easily accessible for all, not speaking legalese or political policy ease, but just speaking to the history. And I say now that every head of the snake that is being cut off is a good thing. And those heads will not only cannot be regenerated, but the connection for the heads must be and are destroyed and will not multiply. The bulldogs who are on watch must say enough is enough and learn from history, lest we all become victims of repeat history. That's all I have for now. And I'll close again by saying this is neither liberal or conservative, progressive or not, because all of us can be impacted by this evil. Stay aware, stay faithful, keep asking questions, and I don't know, just trust. I was about to say, and trust that everything will work out, but you know what? Things will be what our decisions cause them to be. There are consequences for every decision made by our leaders and by ourselves. That's all for today. We'll share more tomorrow. Talk soon.